This is Beekeeper Confidential, a show about the curious lives of bees and their beekeepers. I'm your host, Mandy Shaw. This interview was months in the making. I made my first request for an interview via Instagram while at a cocktail party. Let's just say I was feeling courageous. I officially booked it in February and then recorded it from my apiary on May 6th. On the day of the interview, I was minutes away from receiving our guest's phone call when a swarm call came in. I didn't answer it, obviously, but they also sent a text with photos that I received during the interview, and it was a prime swarm right in my neighborhood, right near a patch of known bee trees, hanging at eye level. Oh my God! So not only did I have an epic conversation with our guest, I also got to go and collect an epic swarm right afterwards. It was a totally amazing day. I cannot tell you how excited I am to share this interview with you. He's the scientist who shocked the bee world when he tested and proved what varroa mites are really pigging out on. Meet the talented, the brilliant singing scientist, Dr. Samuel Ramsey. Hello.
Hey, Mandy.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I'm just a little bee girl with a podcast, but your name comes up with my guests a lot.
Oh.
Yeah, and I'm kind of a fangirl too, so you seem like you're really a lot of fun and a really happy and cheerful person, and I love your singing. And I kind of imagine you like working in the lab, like singing about all the stuff you're doing. And then everybody else is like backup dancers, backup singers.
Most of the time that I spend in the lab, I do spend singing, but not singing about what I'm doing. Just random songs that pop into my head from like 20 years ago, and I wonder how they got there.
Okay, let's dive right in. Your research on the varroa mite is kind of earth-shattering news in the bee industry, and it changes the way that we approach varroa mite.
Mm-hmm.
When you first came up with the idea to test this, did you have any idea that you would make such an important discovery?
No. And even now, I'm still gobsmacked by how everything came around to be what it is, because I originally did not plan on studying varroa. I entered graduate school studying parasites of stink bugs. So think about how far away this project is from what I started with. But life has a way of bringing things back around to where they should be, and the stink bugs just weren't where I was supposed to be.
Wow.
I ended up in Dennis Van Ingelstorp's lab, but I still really wanted to study some sort of parasite-host interaction, and so he said, there's some weird things going on with varroa. Why don't you look into this parasite and see what you think of this? And I jumped in, and the rest is history. Nothing has been more fascinating to me than how weird this relationship is between this parasite and host.
And so now, like, I think of you like you're the quester that is like saving the world. You've gone on this quest, and I think you've really found a chink in the armor of this big boss enemy of the video game, you know?
Oh, I hope so. And you're speaking my language when you're speaking the language of video games. I've played a lot in my day.
All right, so which video game character are you?
Ooh! Oh my gosh! You're a hard-hitting interviewer. You know that. Let me think. Which video game character am I? Oh, that is a tough one because I love so many.
We can always circle back to that.
We'll have to circle back to that.
Okay.
It's probably going to end up being a Final Fantasy character.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm thinking like we're in this video game and the Varroa mite is like the boss enemy. But then you beat the boss enemy and then you find out that there's an even bigger boss enemy, and that's the Tropolelaps mite. Tell us about
Yes.
that.
Yes. So Tropolelaps mercedes is the Tropolelaps mite that people should really be considering as, the potential for the next big problem with bees. This mite is about a third the size of Varroa, but like 3 times as gnarly. They are so much more frightening than Varroa, in my opinion. They move very quickly. They just run all around, darting back and forth on the frames in colonies, and they kill colonies so much faster than Varroa. You can, from the moment that a colony gets infected with Varroa, there's a clock winding down, but it's a clock that's on a matter of years. Like, you can go a good 2 years with a mite infestation until it really ramps up and destroys the colony. But usually it starts fairly small. With Tropolelaps, within the same season that you get them, that colony is pretty much destined for failure. And the fact that this parasite is moving outside of its original geographic range from Southeast Asia, it's emerged and found its way to a lot of different countries and is clearly making its way to the Middle East, and I'm very concerned about where it's going to go from there. And then in addition to that, this particular parasite has also been expanding its host range. So it's expanded its geographic distribution, but it's also found other hosts that it can feed on, and they are not all honeybees. They've been found associated with carpenter bees, which is crazy to me.
Oh. So
yeah.
What does the Tropolelaps mite need to reproduce? I mean, we know Varroa reproduces in the brood, but what's the mechanism for the Tropolelaps mite? How are they gaining traction?
So the Tropolelaps mite is an organism that we have not spent nearly enough time studying. Please hear me when I say this. We don't know nearly enough about this organism. And that's the primary reason why I'm heading over to Southeast Asia for a year. So from May of this year to May of next year, I'll be over there studying this organism and trying to learn everything about it that we can learn, because we don't even know what they're eating.
Oh my God.
We don't know. Yeah. When they attach themselves to bees, we're not sure what tissue they're interested in. Very similar to Varroa, but at least with Varroa, we thought we knew what they were feeding on. We don't even think we know what Tropolelaps are feeding on, and we don't know what stimulates reproduction in them. So if there's a set of molecules that gets the whole set of reproductive processes going, we don't even know what's to target. We don't know what to look at. We don't know what chemicals are best at controlling them. We don't know what treatment methods will keep them under control. It's concerning.
Wow. And you have a GoFundMe campaign to help fund this research, and I encourage everybody listening today to donate whatever you can, because this is important, and as a beekeeper, this can affect me. It can affect my bees, and I don't want that to happen.
Well, thanks, Mandy. I appreciate that.
I'll put a link to it in the show notes so people can click on it and then click donate.
Yeah. If you go to GoFundMe and GoFundMe/fund honeybee research, mine comes up. Awesome. So if you want to click the donate button, it would be very helpful.
How do you design a research project like this where so little is known about how they operate?
Oh, that's the fun part. Okay, so you were talking about how with Varroa, this crazy discovery comes about, and I was not expecting a crazy discovery with Varroa, but this did turn out to be something really fundamental to this organism. The reason why I didn't expect that is because we've been studying Varroa forever, for decades and decades and decades. Researchers have been putting attention to this organism, and we've learned a lot about it. Varroa is not a creature that we knew little about until I got onto the scene. I was just able to tack on a new set of facts to what we were learning about this creature. With Tropolelaps, it's exactly the opposite. We know very little about this organism, and so that just creates this totally open field where I can just dash through and ask whatever questions that I want to. And the fun part about it is whatever I discover will be novel. And so it kind of leaves things in a really cool space where I don't have to worry that the project that I'm undertaking might not turn up something that'll be interesting. Whatever comes up will be interesting.
Wow. Well, the things that you've discovered about Varroa, do you think that's going to... Oh, yes?
Bug catcher from Pokemon.
Yes!
Yep.
I love it. Okay, I gotta like hop into Photoshop and see if I could do some mashup.
I would love to see that if you make that work, by the way.
Okay, cool. So now that we know what we do about Varroa, do you think we could make better treatments based on what we know about them feeding off of the fat bodies?
Yes. Yes, I do. I think that every little piece of knowledge that gets added to the system is like a piece in a puzzle that helps us better resolve what the image is that we're looking at. And so with Varroa, we found out that there was a piece in the wrong place, and we've moved it to a new place, and now the image that we're looking at is a little bit clearer than it was before. That movement of one piece isn't going to fix the entire situation. It's not going to allow us to just easily fix things, but it points us in the right direction, and it also helps move us away from directions that were dead ends. So there were research projects based on the idea that Varroa was feeding on the bee's blood, where they attempted to put some sort of miticide in the bee's blood so that when the mite fed on the bee, it would be poisoned by feeding on the bee's blood. The problem is that the fat body and the blood have the exact opposite chemistry. And so something that accumulates in the blood won't usually accumulate in the fat body and vice versa. And so now that we are aware of why those experiments failed, we can potentially use that to reorient our thinking and go in a different direction this time around. So there are researchers who are already working on trying to adapt some of those miticides to the fat body, but it's also really important for us to consider what set of nutrition the mites are getting from the fat body. If we can disrupt their ability to get those nutrients from the fat body, then we can disrupt essential processes that the mites have to go through. There was recently a paper, who is the author on it? I think it's Benjamin Conlon and John Keefis. But it is a really fascinating paper because it talks about how Varroa are feeding on the bees, and there is a hormone in the bee's body that the mites appear to be using to stimulate reproduction in their own bodies.
What?
And and it's interesting because that specific hormone is almost certain is produced by the fat body, because the fat body is what produces most of the hormones in the bee's body. Yeah. And so us knowing things like that, the hormone is called ecdysone, by the way. With us knowing things like that, it's really, really, really helpful for us, because if we want to disrupt the reproductive process, we know that ecdysone, that hormone, is essential to getting those wheels turning. And if we can mess with the mite's ability to pick up the ecdysone from the bees, then we can mess up the process of them reproducing.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, right?
I'm a little bit mind blown. I mean, what purpose do Varroa mites have other than just decimating honeybee colonies?
So that is a great question, because I believe that all organisms serve some sort of purpose. Ecologically, everything fits together into this really fascinating chain. Everyone has their niche.
Yeah.
Everything works together. With Varroa, it might look like they are the exception to that rule, and that would not be accurate. We are simply thinking about it the wrong way. We have created an extremely unnatural situation. And as a result, we have created a parasite that decimates honeybees when it did not exist in the wild in that way. So let me put it to you this way. Under normal circumstances, honeybees don't like to have their colonies very close to each other. And so in the wild, when they're doing their little honeybee democracy thing, a la Tom Seeley, And when they're scouting and figuring out where are we going to put our new home, how are we going to do this, they will find if there are other colonies in the vicinity and within I believe it's a 3-kilometer radius. If there's a close honeybee colony nearby, they will go farther away to ensure that they're not really close to each other. And that relates to the distance that a normal bee will travel when its own colony collapses and it needs to find some new space to live out its usefulness until it eventually dies.
Wow.
Well, bees, the reason why they want to be far enough away from each other so that a bee from a collapsing colony can't find theirs, because collapsing colonies are usually collapsing because of some sort of disease, oftentimes because of a parasite like varroa. And you want to punish a parasite that kills your colony. So if you take me down, you're going down with me. And so under those circumstances, because the bees in natural settings have kept their colonies so far apart, the genes that are related to virulence usually don't rise up to high levels in a natural population of varroa. They get weeded out because those mites end up killing themselves by killing the colony. However, we've put the mites in a situation where they are rewarded by destroying the colony that they're in, because then they are ferried off to a colony right next to them, or just a half a mile down the road, and they're able to continue reproducing and distributing their population far and wide.
And so for urban beekeepers like myself, what is our best bet to help the problem not hurt the problem, not make it worse?
So I know that there is quite a debate going on right now between the treatment beekeepers and the non-treatment beekeepers.
Yeah.
So before I say what I'm going to say, I'd like to preface this by saying I don't think things should be so contentious. One reason why they shouldn't be so contentious is because every single one of us is on the same side. I've never met a beekeeper who has ever said, I really want my bees dead. And if you think about the amount of money that we put into this, like I just bought my dad a bunch of equipment. He just became a beekeeper. Super proud of him.
Awesome.
Yeah. And just realizing how expensive all of this stuff is.
Oh, yeah.
As a beekeeper, you get really invested in all of this.
Yes.
Like I had help when I got started. I got started at a university, and there's always been equipment lying around. So this is my first time having to actually start up from scratch and buy everything.
Oh,
and
how much did you spend?
Oh my gosh. I will say we got some help. Some good friends of ours actually donated some equipment to us.
Sweet.
And Be Smart Designs actually donated some hive stands and some feeders. So that was really nice of them. But buying all these boxes, buying all of the different equipment, the starter kit, a couple of extra bee suits for my mom and my sister want to go out there. It was well over $1,500 for everything.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. So there's an entrance fee into this process that causes everyone to be pretty invested,
Yeah.
And as a result of that, it is crazy to me sometimes to listen to beekeepers talk about other beekeepers as if they desire to kill their bees.
Yeah.
When people do make decisions that are ill-informed and ill-advised, and oftentimes that's because any perspective that exists in the world can be supported by ridiculous stuff on the internet. And so,
yes.
It is very easy to kill your bees with Facebook, because there's so many Facebook groups that are peddling terrible information about how to protect your bees, and people listen to it. But it's not that those people want to kill their bees. It's often that they are grossly misinformed. Now, when it comes to this debate of whether you should treat your bees or not treat your bees, for us to think that the people who aren't treating their bees or who are treating their bees, the reason why they're doing it is because they don't care about their bees and they want their bees dead, that immediately causes us to look at people the wrong way and to then demonize their perspective and never listen to their side of things. Everybody has the same goal in mind. We want there to be a day where we never have to put any more chemicals into a honeybee colony. We want things taken back to what they used to be. There was a time where you could put a box out there and those bees would take care of themselves. And now those days are over. There was a time where you could be a bee haver. Now that we've got varroa and all these other parasites, you have to be a beekeeper. And so I know, based on what I have seen with my own eyes, what I've seen in my own operations, what I've seen at the University of Maryland, the USDA, and from the surveys that the Bee Informed Partnership does every year, individuals who treat their colonies lose substantially fewer colonies than individuals who do not. And the reason why that's important to the question that you asked earlier about what can we do to help this situation rather than hurt this situation. Well, what we can do, we can reduce the populations of these mites artificially. We can intervene in these colonies, and our intervention can keep these mites from building up to levels that are ridiculously damaging, but it also keeps these mites from developing the sets of genes that make them more and more and more virulent. It also keeps these mites from accumulating all of these extra viruses that make them more and more and more virulent. We found mites with multiple different viruses in them, and it's frightening because the bees might be able to deal with a little bit of deformed wing virus, but deformed wing virus, black queen cell virus, Lake Sinai virus, all these other viruses all lumped together in the same mite, then transmitting it to the bee. No matter how healthy that bee is, no matter how healthy that colony is, their immune system is going to be overwhelmed. So when we allow a mite in one colony to overcome that colony, absorb the viruses in that colony, and then move to the next colony, overcome that colony, absorb the viruses in that colony, and then move to the next one, we're accumulating not just a huge amount of viruses, but the genes that make that mite so virulent are being passed on to greater and greater numbers of mites as this generation widens and widens. When we intervene in that, yeah, exactly. When we intervene in that situation and we reduce those populations of the mite artificially, we are able to take a crack at getting rid of those virulence genes in that population. And while we're never going to fully get rid of these genes, we can at least keep them from being the primary set of genes in the U.S. When varroa first arrived, they were not nearly as virulent as they are now. And we can tell this based on, so they arrived in 1987. The treatment recommendations back then, they were saying somewhere between 50 and 100 mites was the treatment threshold, which is crazy to me.
Like in the whole
100
hive?
mites? No, per 100 bees.
What?
Yeah. Do you know how crazy that is?
Whoa.
Like if you do a sugar shake and 50 mites fall out and they're like, yeah, you should probably treat then.
I would barf if that happened to one of my hives now.
Yeah, I would as well. And the bees would die. Even if you treated them, there's no coming back from that pretty much.
Oh, wow.
Well, now the treatment threshold is 3 mites per 100 bees. A 3% infestation in your colony is the point at which you should start treating, because if you allow the population to get larger than that, they will substantially damage your bees. And if you allow it to go farther than 5 mites per 100 bee, even after you treat, there has always already been so much damage to your colony that you will start to see issues in that colony. Now, it's not necessarily past the point of no return, but it has substantially damaged your colony. Now, the fact that there is such a dramatic difference in about 30 years' time is remarkable. But us allowing these populations of mites to be rewarded by killing more and more colonies is what has allowed them to evolutionarily accumulate this set of very unnatural virulence genes that has led to them being the crazy creatures that they are now. So if we really want to help the situation, we need to do something to reduce the numbers of mites in this colony. Now, in our colonies. Now, what I know is a very frequent response to that is, well, if we take care of this problem for the bees will never learn to take care of themselves. We should try to promote resistance genes in our bees by allowing them to deal with the mites themselves. And the colonies that can't handle it will die, and will breed from the stock that can. And that is an awesome idea. I love how it sounds, but in practice, it is very difficult. And it's very difficult because you have to be willing to let tons of colonies die. If you were looking for a set of genes that were fairly common in the population, you would not have to let quite so many colonies die. But because the set of genes that you're looking for is an uncommon set of genes to begin with, you have to let, if you have a population of thousands, you have to let several hundred of them die. Maybe in terms of like 970 something colonies die, and the few that you have left over might have enough resistance to do something with. And most people cannot deal with that level of loss from their colony.
Yeah.
Now, if we think about this as an evolutionary arms race, it might help individuals understand why I'm making such a dramatic statement about this. Consider that the mites themselves, so think of this like a fight, and every time the mites get to choose a weapon, the bees get to choose a weapon. And so if the mites choose this big, giant, blunt force object, and the bees choose a shield, then they can deal with that, and that works out great, all right? But that's not actually how it ends up working, because the mites have a new population. They can have a new population every month. The bees, not so much. And so actually multiple times a month. And in some areas of the country, the mites can just continue reproducing all year round. Every time the mites reproduce, they have the genetic opportunity to select for different sets of genes that can allow for them to be better at exploiting the bees. Every time the bees reproduce, they have the opportunity to potentially select some set of genetics that will allow them to be stronger against the mites. But if the mites are reproducing several times in a year, a dozen times in a year, and the bees are reproducing how many?
Once or twice.
Yeah,
swarm.
Once,
I mean, they're
once in a blue moon, it seems, because we don't want them to.
Yeah.
We don't want them to split. We don't want the colony to fly off with all of our honey to a new place. And so a lot of beekeepers will artificially keep their bees from reproducing. And so under those circumstances, the bees have almost no chance of winning an evolutionary arms race against these mites, who are able to choose so many more weapons than the bees can choose in a regular amount of time.
Dang.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just put the bees in your hive and walk away. You can't do that anymore. If you're going to choose to be a treatment-free beekeeper, you still have to manage, and you still have to understand what's happening in your hive.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
And treatment-free doesn't mean no intervention whatsoever.
That's right.
I mean, you can be a treatment-free beekeeper and do drone cullings. And I've met treatment-free beekeepers with really happy, healthy colonies that they've been able to keep going with just non-chemical methods of intervening and doing something about the mite population. So,
well, I think also being willing to take the step to put a colony down when they've gotten to the point where they are now at a risk to the colonies around them. Man, oh man.
It's rough, especially after you've named it. My dad's named all three of his, and I am terrified of what's going to happen when he finally loses one. He's going to lose one day. There's no beekeeper in the world who hasn't lost a colony.
When we do our beginning beekeeping class for the Beekeeping Association, we always say, you're going to kill bees. Just accept it. That's part of it.
Yep.
And don't get caught up in squishing one bee, or, don't think of that. Think of the entire colony. So you mentioned Bee Informed Partnership. This year, I signed up to be one of their Sentinel apiaries. And so I got my kit last month, and I was doing testing on my Sentinel colonies today before our conversation. And I'm really excited to be participating in that. Although, I have to say, the bottle and the funnel that came with it are so small that it's really a struggle to get all the bees through it into the bottle. Do you know anyone there? I mean, can you size? Oh, come on, make it just a little bit bigger. If you have a connection, just if you could put in a good word for me.
I can definitely. I do have some connections there, and I can pass that on.
Yeah, totally. But it was kind of a proud moment to take my little BIP Sentinel apiary tags and staple them onto my hives. Like, yeah, I'm helping out here. I'm helping the greater good.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I saw that on your Instagram. And I was like,
yeah. And I think that I'm only one of 2 or 3 other apiaries in the state of Oregon that's participating.
Good gravy.
I know. I know. So if anybody's listening, you have a chance to participate.
Spread the word.
Spread the word.
Yes.
Take the surveys. Take all the surveys. And if you can participate in something like this, do it. Because it's rad. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I tried writing a song about varroa mites for us to sing today, but I really didn't get past the first line.
Wait, what was the first line?
It goes, I don't have the same pipes as you do. You've been blessed with pipes, but it goes, hey varroa, boo 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 boo, I don't wanna know ya, boo boo boo, and then I get kind of stuck. So I don't know. Think about that. You might come up with some more lines, and we'll do a duet someday.
Oh, I love this. Oh, hey varroa, boo boo boo. I wanna know ya, because I wanna show ya the end of my hive tool when I squish you. Do 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 do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that was beautiful. We can't top that. That was amazing. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for our time today. It's been absolutely a delight talking with you.
It's been a delight talking with you as well, Mandy.
Awesome.
And I'm hoping that we'll get to meet at one of these cool meetings. Are you going to Apimondia?
Would love that. I'm not coming to Apimondia.
Okay.
Not this year, but maybe down the road.
Okay.
Yeah.
But one of these days,
you have an open invitation to Portland, Oregon. Portland Urban Beekeepers. I can get you into any meeting you want.
Sweet. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
I will keep you posted.
Thanks so much. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
For highlights from today's interview, visit my blog at waggleworkspdx.com. For more bee adventures, you can also follow me on Instagram at beingmandy, and that's B with 2 E's, and at Beekeeper Confidential. If you like what you're listening to and want to help support this podcast, visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/Mandy Shaw. Be sure to tune in next week for my mini episode for updates on what's going on with my bees. Until next time, may the buzz be with you. Beekeeper Confidential is a Waggleworks production and is written and produced by Mandy Shaw.
Hey there.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going pretty well. How are you?
I'm awesome. I'm calling you from my apiary. This will be my first time
Ooh.
recording an episode out in the field, surrounded by beehives. I'm sitting under this tree. I don't know what kind it is, but there's little white flowers on it, and I can hear the bees. And I looked up, and there's one with giant pollen pants, and she's just happy buzzing on all the flowers. When I arrived here this morning, I saw a bunny rabbit, and I came here early today because I got a call yesterday that these people had bumblebees living in one of their birdhouses, and so I came and got it for them. Normally, I would just advocate for people to leave them, but this time I didn't because the birdhouse is in their backyard and they have a daycare, and the birdhouse is like right there where the kids like to play. So I came and got it, and I brought it out here, and they're so loud. They're very roary and very different from honeybees. The first few times I ever moved bumblebees, I was like a really shaky, jittery, nervous mess. But today it wasn't as bad. I did better. And so I got them hung up in a really cute little spot. And hopefully they survive. Bumblebees are difficult. They usually don't do well when you travel with them. I don't know why.